Hi folks, welcome to another episode of My Life with Robert Burns. Jim Thompson and myself here to talk to one of our cronies from around the Burns world. Hi Jim, how are you?
Doing absolutely fantastic, Douglas. Lovely weather, and hello everybody from sunny Kilmarnock.
We mentioned last time in our podcast that we're going to be talking to somebody who's on an outreach project to take Burns to the wilder reaches of Cheshire. So tonight, cronies, I'd like to give a great welcome to Gareth Butler. Hi, Gareth.
Good evening, Douglas. Good evening, Jim. Good evening, everyone.
How are you today?
I'm really good. It's an absolute pleasure to be doing these. I've listened to every single one of them. They've been my company in the car for the long commute that I have every day to work, and I'm really pleased to be taking part in this one. The only problem, of course, is that I've got nothing to listen to this week because I'm in it. So I'll have to revisit one of the older ones maybe.
Well, you know that the first question we always ask is, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. My name is Gareth Butler. I was born on the 24th of July 1986. So that makes me 34, I think, currently. People often think that I'm older than I am. They seem to say I've got a bit of an old head on my shoulders. One of my secretaries at work a few years ago came up to me one Friday afternoon and she said, "What are you doing at the weekend?" I said, "I'm going to Dublin." She said, "That's a very nice thing to do at the weekend." I said, "Well, it's my birthday." And she said, "That's a nice thing to be doing for your birthday." I said, "Well, it's not a big one, but it's certainly a milestone one." And she looked me up and down and she said, "Surely you can't be 40. I said, no, I'm not 40. And then she did a double take and she went, "I never thought you were 50. So people seem to think I'm a lot older, but not necessarily wiser than I am. So I was born down here on the Wirral Peninsula, which is in Cheshire, or Merseyside, depending on how much of a snob you are. Mum and Dad are Rob and Jean, and I have a younger sister called Elizabeth, and an older brother called Lee, and we all get on very well together. I was schooled at a little primary school called Prenton Primary School, which I loved. And two quite important things happened to me when I was at primary school that I didn't realise were going to be very important in the sort of Burns scheme of things. So I was taken to a farm, and I'll say more on that later on. And I was taken to a big military tattoo when I was very young, and I won't say anything more on those things because they'll crop into the Burns bit later on. Left primary school, went to Woodchurch High School, which I hated. I absolutely detested secondary school, mainly because Lee, my older brother, hated it, and anything that he hated, I could hate better. So I really didn't enjoy secondary school. There was no need for me not to enjoy it. I just decided that I wasn't going to enjoy it, but did enjoy things like drama, music, history, English. They were the subjects out of all of them that really switched me on, really. Joined a drama school and a local theatre group, and we did everything from pantomimes to Shakespeare. And I think looking back now, having done a little bit of Shakespeare, that probably held me in good stead for reading Burns later on in life. Going through every little sentence and every little word of text that is sometimes quite difficult to understand really sort of taught me quite a lot and has made learning Burns a lot easier. So left school, joined a drama college. Didn't enjoy that because it was all sort of take your shoes and socks off and pretend to be a tree, and that just wasn't for me, really. Looking back now, I know that that's what you've got to go through to get to the interesting bit, but I just didn't have the patience for it. So I left that, and Mum and Dad marched me off to a recruitment place, and they said, if you're not learning, you're earning. So I picked up a job spec off the top of a pile of jobs, and it happened to be a job at a solicitor's office for a solicitor's clerk. So I went for the interview on the Friday, got the job, was in post by the Monday, and really enjoyed it. I was the office dog's body, but enjoyed the the tradition of the legal profession and the sort of the formality of it. I liked hanging around with the solicitors and the barristers. Learned to do quite a lot of drinking during that time because they had lots of big chambers dues and things like that. So that was good fun. Still speak to quite a lot of the people that I work with at the solicitor's office. Speak to one of them a lot because I married her, but more on that later on. And spent a few years there, really enjoyed it. But it got to the stage where I either needed to become a solicitor or I was going to be the world's oldest tea boy. And I wasn't planning to become a solicitor, and I make a shocking cup of tea. So I looked at packing that in and started to look for different jobs. One of them that I went for was was a footman at Buckingham Palace. So I've always had a real interest in that upstairs, downstairs thing. I think there must be some kind of family link somewhere with the surname Butler. There's obviously some kind of pull there. So I went for an interview at Buckingham Palace, and it went really well. I spent the day down there, and they gave me a private tour around the palace. At the end of the interview, they said, "We're not quite sure whether you're old enough and whether you're ready for this massive change to lifestyle at the moment, but we'd like to see a little bit more of you. Why don't you come down for a week and spend the week with us?" So I signed all sorts of forms to say that I wouldn't say anything, and waited for the invitation to come through to go back, and it never came. I waited and waited and waited, and it never came. And I just thought, well, that's that. And then a few weeks after that, I picked up one of the newspapers and I saw a headline which related to an undercover news reporter from one of the newspapers who'd been for an interview at Buckingham Palace, got the job, but went in as an undercover reporter, took a picture of the Queen's slippers and breakfast cereal and sold it to the Sun newspaper, I think it was. And he was the guy that got the job. So unfortunately, the palace got it wrong on that occasion. And the one claim to fame that I've got is that the Queen still owes me some expenses money. They said they'd pay my train fare, but they didn't have enough money in petty cash when I went down. So they said, "We'll forward it on to you." So she still owes me 250 quid in expenses. So that was that. Didn't get that job. So I took the easy route out and joined the family business, which is a first aid training company. So I ended up traveling up and down the country teaching first aid to people, which was great. I enjoyed it. I was away from home in the week and then back at home for the weekends, which suited me down to the ground. By this time, I'd met my now wife, Helen, and working away from home in the week is not the best way to start a family and look at buying houses and things like that. So I made the very difficult decision at the time to leave the family business, which I think was probably the right thing to do. It was a bit uncomfortable at the time, obviously, but it was becoming very awkward. Home life was mixing with work life, and it was just very uncomfortable, really. So I made the decision to leave, which in the long run, I think was the right thing to do. And I joined United Utilities, who were the water board down here. So I joined them as a confined space assessor. So I was going into very dirty and horrible holes full of very dirty and horrible things. And I was doing that for 12 months. Then became a controller at one of the treatment works, and then realised that it was far too cold and far too smelly to work at a treatment works. So I went back to doing what I was doing when I was self-employed with the family, but this time at United Utilities, and I joined their training department, and I've been there ever since. And it keeps us in holidays and handbags and Haribo for the little one. So it's a good place to be. During that time, when I was going from the transition from the solicitors to the family business to United Utilities, something else quite key to the Burns bit of my life happened. and I joined the Freemasons as a Lewis. So normally you've got to be 21. If your dad's in the lodge and you write a nice letter to the Grand Master, then if he likes the sound of you, he'll let you come in at 18, which I did, and I've been in ever since. During that time as well, Helen and I got married. We had a fabulous fairy tale wedding up in Scotland, up in Haddington. Lennox Love House was the venue. And that was quite unusual because we knew we wanted to get married in Scotland. We've always loved Scotland. We holiday up there quite a lot. So we started to look at venues, mainly as an excuse to go to Scotland once every fortnight, really, and just wander around lovely stately homes. We found this particular venue, absolutely fell in love with it. But the lady, the wedding organizer said, well, if you want it for the time of year that you want it, around about Christmas time, you'll have to book it now. And I said, well, I haven't proposed yet. And they both looked at me as if to say, well, you better pull your finger out then. We paid the deposit on the venue before we'd even decided on anything else. So a few months later, I proposed. My wife's always had a real obsession with pirates. So I did this big elaborate pirate tour around London. We ended up at the Golden Hind and had a private tour around the Golden Hind. And then at the end, they lowered the masts and there was a message written on the mast, Helen, will you marry me? I got up on one knee at that stage because I've had quite a lot to drink and and the rest, as they say, is history. So we had a fabulous wedding. It snowed, it was beautiful. It was a full Scottish pipes, haggis. Everyone was in kilts and it was an absolute fairy tale wedding. And in fact, I was thinking about it earlier on when I was thinking about what I was going to say for this interview. And there was a real special bit for me where the day after the wedding, we were all sort of sat round and all of the guests were leaving. And I was sat in the big drawing room with Lee, my elder brother. And there was a piano in the corner, and I just started tinkling away and started playing Auld Lang Syne for no reason. It just seemed like quite a nice song to play, and it was a really poignant moment. Everybody else had gone; it was just the two of us, and I don't know why it seemed like the right song to play. And I've never really spoken to him about it actually since then. But it was just a real nice moment. And Auld Lang Syne was the song that came to mind.
So it sounds to me as though you're a little bit of a romantic with the pirate proposal and the Auld Lang Syne at the end of the wedding and all these kind of things.
Yeah, I don't know whether I'm a romantic. I think possibly, yeah. I think more than anything else, I've always been a bit of a frustrated showman. So if there's ever an occasion to play a song or do a recital or just do something different, really, then I'll always do that. I don't like things to be boring and miserable.
You talked about listening to previous podcasts on your way to work. Is the journey to work quite long? Yeah, it's about an hour and a half. And it can get really boring sometimes. So these, genuinely, I'm not just saying this because you've both sat there, they've been a real godsend over the past 12 months, I think, isn't it? They've been going now. Since July of last year, yeah. Yeah, they've been really great, every single one of them. And I think obviously the Robert Burns bit is really interesting to us all. But the My Life bit, this bit is up until today probably, I think is really, really interesting too. And you really do, and this sounds a bit sad, but I think more so because I listen to them rather than watch them, you really do feel like you've got to know somebody by the end of it. And very apt, of course, because 200 odd years ago, Burns was collecting people's stories and tales, and that's exactly what you two are doing now. And I think that's quite fun. Yeah. You talked about school and the subjects you studied. What about sports and things like that? Did you get involved in sport?
I got involved with them. I was awful at them. I did enjoy them, actually. I'm by no means a sporty person, although 2 minutes before we started this interview, I was running around the garden with Ava, my 8-year-old, playing basketball. So I would never consider myself sporty or very good at them. But I did enjoy them. I quite like cross country. I preferred rugby rather than football. Terrible at it, but I preferred it. The family are very sporty. Mum was very sporty. She played for Cheshire. Dad liked his rugby and football when he was younger. But now I think with the children, it's definitely more the artistic side that comes out than the sporty side.
Although you forced yourself to watch the game at Wembley the other night.
Well, I saw bits of it. Ava was at a singing lesson. So I saw little bits, listened to little bits, missed both goals, but knew they'd scored because on both occasions I was driving past the local pub just as they'd scored, and the pub started to bounce.
Anyway, we won't go any further down the road talking about football because it's not a subject that is close to our hearts in Scotland at the moment.
To be honest with you, I don't follow any sport other than the big stuff. So I'll watch all the stuff that's going on at the moment, Six Nations. I watch anything, I'll tune into Wimbledon. Anything big, I really enjoy. The day-to-day stuff doesn't really interest me as much.
The one thing I did want to ask you about before we move on and talk in a bit more depth about your interest in Burns is the craft beers. You seem to be keen to sample craft beers from all over the country and then tell us how good they were.
Yeah, I've always liked to drink. Guinness is my first love. I've got an obsession with Guinness, but really enjoy craft beers, real ales, and I'm part of an online group, a Facebook group, Masonic Craft Beer Group or something like that, and they like you to review beers, which works well because it means you've got to drink more of them. So yeah, I enjoy drinking them, but very much like Burns, I don't like a lot of them. So I like a drink, like he supposedly did. I love pub atmospheres. One of the things that we looked at when we were buying our new house was, is there a decent pub nearby? And thankfully there is. So I love a drink, but I don't like to do lots of it because it spoils the taste and just ruins it. On occasions, a plentiful, bountiful supply is nice, but yeah, just the odd one does me well. And most of the stouts that I drink are sort of 8, 9, 10%. There was a 14% one the other day. So the last thing you want to do is start guzzling something like that. It's only going to end in tears.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that you're a Guinness drinker because they're partly responsible for paying my pension.
Oh, I believe so. Yeah. I would love a job at Guinness. I would be a happy man if I could get a job at Guinness.
Well, the guys that work over at the brewery in Dublin are a great bunch of guys, so you would enjoy their company. Anyway, company is what Burnsins are all about. So let's get into the Burns stuff, and I'll ask Jim to start the conversation about Burns with you.
Well, Gareth, you've heard the podcast, so quite simple. How did you collide with Burns?
Purely by accident, really. So I mentioned earlier on that when I was very small, I was taken to a farm. And that farm is a little farm that we've got down here that is like a little section of rural Ayrshire that has been lifted up and plonked right in the middle of the Wirral, in quite a rough area of the Wirral, around by the Docklands area, a place called Bidston. And right in the middle of the town is this beautiful, traditional, thatched cottage urban farm. And it's a day out that every child in the local area gets taken on. It's a cheap day out. You go and see the pigs. You go and have a hot chocolate in the cafe. You go and have a walk up and down the hill nearby, which has got a big windmill at the top, and you pack up and go home. And it's a nice cheap day out. And and everybody in the local area goes. My mum and dad used to play around on the farm. They then took us. We've taken our kids, and the farm happens to be called Tam O'Shanter Urban Farm. The reason being, there's a carving on the gable end of one of the farm buildings of Tam, you know, the classic image over the brig with the witches chasing him. And that was put there by the guy that owned it in 18 something or other, a man called Richard Lee, who was a stonemason. And for reasons that I'm researching at the moment but can't really get to the bottom of, he put this depiction of Tam O'Shanter on the back end of his farm, hence the name Tam O'Shanter Farm. And I must have been told as a young kid by someone, presumably mum or dad, it's called Tam O'Shanter Farm because it's named after this poem by a Scottish bloke called Robert Burns. He wrote a poem called Tam O'Shanter. And that was it. That was my Burns education done. I think Dad could recite 2 words from To a Mouse, and that was about it. Certainly not mentioned at school down here, anything like that. But the seed was definitely planted. I knew who Robert Burns was. Round about the same time, when I was very small, I was taken to a big military tattoo at the Royal Tournament, which many people will remember as the oldest military tattoo. And it was a huge, big event down in London. And I was taken by my godparents who were working at the tournament at the time. And they took me backstage and we had dinner in the mess and they showed me round the show. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I was in awe of this huge, big military tattoo. And we went back every year after year, and I became really interested in the production side of things and started to follow the careers of a lot of the production crew. And in particular, a bloke called Major Sir Michael Parker, who also produced for a number of years the Edinburgh Tattoo, as it was then. You can't have an interest in tattoos without visiting Edinburgh. So I was taken up to Edinburgh. We all went up for a family holiday in 1996. That was the first Edinburgh tattoo that we went to. And of course, 1996, the theme was Robert Burns. So all of the music was Burns related. They did depictions of his life. They did little bits and pieces of some of the poems. They did bits of Tam O'Shanter. So we all sort of looked at each other and said, oh, look, they're doing Tam O'Shanter. That's named after our farm. Or the farm is named after that poem. And so I got a 90-minute education in Robert Burns. Still no obsession with him. Liked some of the music and thought some of the poetry was great. But that was my first real bit of education towards Burns. That was a great year. And I think Cameron Goodall would have been there by then. So he would have had an input into the Burns stuff. And of course, Alistair Hutton, the commentator, a great Burnsian. No doubt he would have had a lot of involvement in the writing of the script. So that was the second little bit of Burns that I'd been given. Then I joined the lodge. And one of our big nights is, of course, our Burns supper. Now, our Burns suppers down here aren't proper Burns suppers. They have a haggis, someone addresses it, and that's about it. But I bought a kilt for I was given a kilt for my wedding. It was a Christmas present off the family. And so obviously, consequently, at Burns suppers, I'd stick the kilt on. Not that many people wear the kilt down here. So if you wear a kilt at a Burns supper, you're given a job to do, which initially was carrying the haggis. So year after year, I'd carry in the haggis, stand behind our piper, Pipe Major Joe Kerr, who he was a Scottish fella, did a brilliant address to the haggis. And one year I decided to have a Burns supper at our house, just for the family. I don't really know why, but I thought it'd be a nice thing to do. So we held a Burns supper and I learned the address to the haggis. And I think I did a bit of an immortal memory as well. And then not long after that, I was at a lodge Burns supper, and the guy that was doing the address that night, after he'd finished, sat down next to me at the festive board, And I said, that was great. That was really brilliant. And he said, oh, well, I've got a bit of a problem, actually. He said, I'm the master at my lodge next week. I'm being installed in the chair in my lodge, and I can't address my own haggis. So I said, well, I'll do it if you want. I can't promise that I'll be any better than you, but I'll give it a good go. So I did, and it went fine. And because not that many people do that many Burns things down here, if you do it, then you get called back to do it. And it just sort of snowballed from there, really. I went and did a few more addresses that year, and wrote a few more Immortal Memories. And of course, when you pen in your Immortal Memory, you automatically are researching the guy. And it was then that I realised how fascinating he was. And I felt a strange, it sounds really silly and a bit poncy, but a bit of a connection with him as well. So there was lots of bits of him that I thought, I can relate to that. So just became completely, not obsessed, but just very, very interested in him. Started to watch old documentaries on YouTube. And one particular Christmas, I said to everybody, right, don't get me anything other than Burns stuff. Whether it's a book, a CD, whether it's a film about him or an ornament or whatever, I just want Burns stuff. And true to the word, the family went out and spoiled me rotten and got me loads of great books. They didn't buy yours, Jim. It's on the list. I've got a birthday the week after next, and it's on the list. I'll send it up to get signed. So I just started reading more and more and watching more and more and listening to more and more stuff. And then the obsession started, really. One of the things that kickstarted it was David Sibbald's CD of poems. So I started listening to that on the way to work on that awful long commute. And I listened to Tam O'Shanter in full for the first time. And it completely blew me out. I wasn't expecting to be that moved by a piece of art or poetry. Nothing had ever done that. Songs had, but certainly not poetry. And by the end of it, the chase at the end, I was gripping the steering wheel, and I was Tam O'Shanter riding along in the car. And afterwards, I thought that was absolutely unbelievable. I've never heard anything like that before, and I thought, I've got to learn it. So I learned it for no real reason, really. I didn't think I'd ever need to recite it anymore, but I thought it'd be a nice thing to learn. And then I got a telephone call from a brother from one of the lodges around here who holds a proper Burns supper, co-hosted by a load of Scottish Freemasons that come down. So it is it's the real McCoy, if there is such a thing. It's a big one, sort of 200 people go, and there's a big charity element to it as well. And he happened to mention that he knew I did the haggis and did Immortal Memories and stuff. And he asked me if I did anything else, because his guy, who normally comes down from Scotland to do Tam, was sick. And he said, we've got a space to fill. We've got everybody doing all of the usual stuff. Holy Willie was covered, and a couple of the songs were covered. He said, can you do anything for us? I said, well, I've been learning Tam O'Shanter. I've not finished it yet, but I should have it done by January. He said, right, you're booked. And then the realization as to what I'd agreed to set in. I'd agreed to deliver the greatest narrative poem ever written, that I hadn't even learnt at this stage in full, to a load of Scottish Freemasons who were expecting to see their mate do it, who unfortunately was sick, and they were going to be lumped with this Scouse git with a Welsh name wearing a kilt. So the night dawned on me, and I thought, oh, this is going to be a complete disaster. So I did what anybody would do when faced with a potential complete disaster. And I fortified myself heavily and got well into the whiskey beforehand. And luckily enough, it went well. All of the English lads came up to me at the end and said, haven't got a clue what you're on about, but it was great. I think that's the good thing that we've got down here about doing burns. I'd certainly never enter a competition, you know, up your neck of the woods. I wouldn't be so bold as to do that. But down here, as long as you're wearing a kilt and you put enough ochs and e's and i's and oo's in, then all of the English go, oh, that's absolutely brilliant, and they buy you a whiskey, which is great. But more importantly, the Scottish brethren came up at the end and they shook my hand and they said, that was really great, well done. And I thought, great, well, I'll do it more and more. And you know, like with the haggis, I just got invited to more and more suppers, and yeah, and I do that whenever I'm asked, and sometimes when I'm not asked as well. And I love doing it. That frustrated showman in me is back again. The ability to get up and perform something that's just, you know, it's a dream to perform, isn't it? Everybody that does Tam O'Shanter, no matter how many times you hear it or you do it, it's just an absolute dream to perform. So yeah, so that was that. That was where the obsession came from.
Gareth, you mentioned you got a kilt. My interest is solely personal, but what's the tartan?
It's the Lamont tartan or the Lamont tartan, depending which side of the river you sit. So Mum's dad was Scottish, and that's where the link comes from. Always wanted to buy one, and a few years ago she said, "Oh well, actually, your granddad was Scottish." So I thought, right, I'm in. I can legitimately go and buy one, and now I've got 3.
Oh, well, but I mean, you've talked about doing recitations, and obviously you know that we encourage, or we try and get participants to do a wee something when they're on. And obviously I'd like you to do a Burns recitation. However, and the choice is yours, if you're doing Tam O'Shanter, don't do all 224 lines. You do a wee something.
Well, if I take it from the chase then at the end, only because that seems quite apt, given that was the one that really made me go, wow, this is something special. And I'll never ever forget that feeling of sitting in the car, being transported to the brig. It was an unbelievable feeling. So I'll do the end from where it all goes dark. And scarcely had he Maggie rallied when out the hellish legion sallied. As bees buzz out angry fight, come plundering herds assail a bike. As open pussy's mortal foes, when pop she starts afore the nose. As eager runs the market crowd, when catch the thief resounds aloud. So Maggie runs, the witches follow, and Money and Eldrick screech and hollow. Oh, Tam, they'll get thy fearing. In hell they'll roast thee like a hen. In vain thy Kate awaits thy coming. Kate soon will be a woeful woman. So do thy speedy utmost, Meg, and win the keystane of the brig, that at the nearer tail may toss a running stream they then cross. For ere the keystane she could make a fainter tail she had to shake, for Nanny, far beyond the rest, hard upon noble Maggie breast, and flew at Tam with furious ettle. But little wished she'd Maggie's mettle. A spring broke off her master hail, but left behind her ain great tail. The carling clocked by the rump, and left puir Maggie scarce a stump. Now, wha this tale of truth shall read, ilk man and mother son, tak heed. Whene'er to drink ye are inclined, or cutty sarks run in your mind, think you may buy the joys o' dear, but remember, Tam O'Shanter's mere.
Well done. I've got to be honest and tell you that that's the first time I've heard it with a Scouser doing it. I love the poem greatly. It's deeply impactful on people, and it's one of Burns's, well, Burns thought it was his best, but it's certainly one of his masterpieces. But you were talking about going to Haddon for your wedding, so you obviously visit Scotland. Do do any of the Burns Trail when you're up here at all?
Well, because Burns has only become a relatively recent thing, certainly within the past 4 or 5 years, although I've known of him for a long time, and you know, the interest in him was built from the early days at the farm and the tattoo and everything else. He's only really been a hobby or an obsession, I don't like that word, for the past few years. So shamefully, I've never been to the cottage. The last time I went to I was too young to remember it. I've not done the Globe. I've not been to a Burns supper in Scotland, I don't think. So no. Now, interestingly, when I met you and your lot through the bachelor's stuff that I've been very pleased to get involved with, I spoke to a few people and they said, right, well, next time you're up, make sure you let us know and we'll take you around and show you all of the bits and pieces. So no, I've not done the Burns Trail, but can't wait to.
Well, in terms of a Burns supper in Scotland, the best one's definitely Newcomer Burns Club, without hesitation. I've been in millions of Burns suppers, right? And you can't go to that unless you're a member. So if you want to join the club, feel free. It's a £5 or so, right? And you can certainly come to the Burns supper.
Yeah. And
in relation to coming here, I mean, if you know Cammy is just guide spectacular if you want to do Edinburgh. And
well, actually, yeah, sorry to cut you off. My wife had a birthday not long ago, and I thought, well, what can we do? We like going to Scotland. What can we do that's different in Scotland that we've not done before? And we've done all of the usual Edinburgh tours and enjoyed them. But I spoke to Cammy and I said, is there any chance you can do us a special day out somewhere? And he's going to do that for us. So that's good.
Excellent. Well, if part of that trip is a bit of a romantic weekend back in Haddington, remember there is some Burns lore in Haddington as well, so you can go and look for that.
Yeah, Bolton Kirkyard, I'll not say any more.
Okay.
But in terms of that, if you're in Ayrshire, you've got my details. I do Tam O'Shanter walks with mostly Americans, mostly Kennedys from America. But I'm doing more this summer with people, one to Paisley in a couple of weeks. I'll walk you around Maggie's Ride, which is, if you're into Tam O'Shanter, it's really interesting. But just one question I really need to ask you. This idea of being, starting something down there, how did that come to place?
Well, I started to look for Burns lodges, Freemasons lodges, and there's one in Manchester, which isn't too far away from here, and there's a couple of them dotted around, Burns themed lodges or Burns with, lodges with a Burns connection, even if that's just named after him. And when I was searching for Burns lodges online, Burns clubs came up, and I'd never, until this time last year and a bit ago, never ever heard of a Burns club. So I started to do a bit of research online and realised that there was hundreds and thousands of them all over the place. And then I learned about the Federation and I thought, brilliant, I've got this new interest in Burns and there's this whole world of Burns that just opened up in front of me. And then I thought, well, it's a long way to travel, the 5 hours from here to you. But thank you for the kind invitation, and I will take you up on that. Send the join-in forms down as soon as possible. And so I thought, well, why haven't we got one? There's plenty of people around here with a Burns interest. And we've got a nice link to Burns with the farm. There's some Burns clubs around the world that have no real link at all. Not that makes them any less legitimate as such, but I just thought it would be quite unique to set something up down here and have the farm as a venue to host suppers. We can help them out because they're a charity. So that was where the idea came from, really. So I contacted a few people and they seemed to be interested in putting something together. And so that's what we're doing. We're trying to form the Merseyside and Cheshire Tam O'Shanter Burns Club. And COVID slowed it down a little bit. We're hoping to meet on the 21st for a few beers, just as a bit of an inaugural meet. And we're hoping that something will come of it, or something more official at least. And it's already started, actually. I got contacted by the Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts a few weeks ago, LIPA, or the Paul McCartney School of Fame as it's known. And their second year students were doing a piece about the farm. It was a promenade piece, and it was all about the history of the farm from Viking times up until now. The first settlements were in Viking times, and they got hold of us and they said, is there anything that you can do that's Burns related? So we worked with them, and they wanted us to do little bits of Tam O'Shanter. So that was great, doing bits of Tam O'Shanter at Tam O'Shanter Farm with the carving behind us was absolutely brilliant. And then at the end, all of the different groups came together and we all sang Auld Lang Syne in the field. And the particular group that I was involved with was a group of young people with quite severe disabilities, and they loved Tam O'Shanter. They did all of the whistling noises in the background, and they shouted that "Catch the Thief," and they really got involved in it. And it was a real pleasure to do it with them and for the college and for the farm. So it's all, the interest is already there. We just need to build our profile a little bit more and get some events up and running when we're allowed to.
Is your involvement with the tattoos? Now, you've mentioned you've attended them and you've got to know some of the people involved, but do you organise some of these things yourself?
Trying to, yeah. So I always wanted to work on the Royal Tournament, which I mentioned before, and never got the chance to because that stopped in 1999, unfortunately. Then always wanted to go and work at the tattoo up in Edinburgh, but things happened and I never ended up doing that. So I've always been a very frustrated tattoo organiser. And I was involved with a tattoo in Liverpool a few years ago, a big tattoo that they did in the arena here, which was supposed to come back for a second year. So I spoke to my company, United Utilities, and I said, look, there's this big tattoo happening at the big arena. Would you like to sponsor it? Get your name splashed all over the arena, and everyone's a winner. And you said, yeah, we'll give you some money towards the sponsorship towards it. And I was just a hanger-on at the tattoo. I was just carrying boxes and selling programs. So I secured this funding for the Liverpool tattoo, and then it didn't happen. One thing or another, it was before COVID, but it just didn't happen. Funds fell through, I think, and they couldn't make it happen. So I was left with some money from United Utilities that they wanted to give to a tattoo, but no tattoo to give it to. So I thought, right, well, I've always wanted to do one, but I've never had enough money to do it. Now I've got a little bit of money. Let's try and make it happen. So for the past 2 years now, and COVID, of course, again, has sort of hindered us a little bit, but we're putting on a tattoo in 2022. We're doing a concert in 2021, which is a sort of forerunner to the big event in 2022. And the patron of it is a man that I've mentioned already tonight, Major Sir Michael Parker, who's produced just about every tattoo going and all sorts of royal events. So it's nice to have him involved. So yeah, it's nice to have that, again, something else that lets me show off that creative bit of me, that frustrated showman bit again.
We'll look forward to it.
You're talking about the creative bit of you. I mean, having studied your background, I know that you do stuff yourself. You write poetry and you're fond of the piano and stuff like that. You're going to give us some of your own stuff?
Yeah, I think it was getting involved with the bachelors again that made me pick up the pen. And I'm no poet, but I was encouraged by everybody really at the Bachelors Club to get up and do something. And I didn't really want to do any burn stuff because I'm still learning a lot of it. So I thought, well, I'll do something of my own. So I wrote a couple. Sat down with my little girl actually and wrote some. She is a published poet. At the age of 8, she won a competition a few years ago, and she got one of her poems published. So I thought, right, she obviously knows what she's talking about. So it's quite nice to sit down together and write something. So the last one that I wrote was a poem called To Catch a Haggis, because you're actually in the company of a champion this evening. I am the winner of the Chartered Union of the Northern Trossachs Society, Quake. And I'll let some of the more uncouth listeners to the podcast figure out the acronym of the Chartered Union of Northern Trossachs Society. But inspired by winning that competition a few years ago, I thought, right, well, I'll write a poem about catching the haggai. So this is To Catch a Haggis. To catch a wee haggis can be very hard, but do it we must to honour the bard. For he wrote a great poem for us to recite each day 25 on January night. To stalk haggis we must wear a tartler grey and douse ourselves liberally with malt usquibay. As they take off with a dash up mountain and glen, we stalkers must chase them again and again. For they have one wee leg that's shorter than t'other, and they hide in the heather for safety and cover. To catch them, of course, you must change direction. Only this tack will lead to a Burns night dissection. Personally, I like to catch a great braw hairy one, but veggies don't complain. I'm not just a barbarian. I don't just slaughter them for night 25. I also work hard to keep them alive. You see, I'm a laird of Glencoe and of Lochaber, so I'm not just a hunter, but also a saver. I own a square foot of nature reserve for the lives of these beasties I'm keen to preserve. On my plot of land, the haggis can play all year round without fear of Burns Day. They can bathe and mate and sit on their herdies without worry of slaughter from us land-owning lurdies. Although hunting I do with the great and the best to manage this pesky and troublesome pest, as their numbers can be so incredibly high from the lowlands of Cumnock to the islands of Skye. So we catch them and cull them and save till they're ripe. So in January, a piper can blow down his pipe as we all gather round in our chosen Burns place and we open our supper with traditional grace. Then a talented reciter can give the address, such as William Dick or young Bobby Jess. We look forward to when the whiskey comes flooding and we can all stretch and strive for our chieftain of pudding. After which there will be chatter and banter as Cammy will give us his best tam o'shanter. I'll change that, as Jim will give us his best tam o'shanter. With songs and some jokes that will make us all chortle, then Hugh Farrell can give us his memorable immortal. I do hope the guests will not be too crass, as Jane Brown will respond to the toast to a lass. We all celebrate Jan 25th to remember our hero from the banks of the Nith. A celebration that's beaten even COVID-19 with virtual suppers on our laptop screen. We all made the effort to still come together, to enjoy and to learn and to have a good blether. So if you, my dear cronies, will allow one more bad rhyme, let's all join hands and sing Auld Lang Syne.
Excellent. That was tremendous.
That's a good lead-in as well, Douglas.
Oh, it's a perfect lead-in. But I think before we lead into that that final bit, we need to see if Gareth can give us a wee tune on the piano.
Certainly, yeah. Why not? You're going to see the back of my head because I couldn't.
That's okay.
Way, so I do apologise, and I've no idea what the sound quality is going to be like. But I'll blame Zoom and not the bum notes. So just give us a second.
That was great, Gareth. Really enjoyed that. When did you learn to play the piano?
I went to lessons for years and years and can't read a note of music, so I just plonk away, and I'm good enough to, you know, bash out a song at a party.
That was great. We almost mentioned your virtual burn supper earlier on, and I think perhaps you could tell us a bit about that to finish off, because you weren't able to get your new club together physically, but you managed to do something virtually.
We did, yeah, inspired by what you've been doing, really. So although COVID's been horrendous for everyone, and you know, we can't wait to get back to some level of normality, the virtual stuff has been, for us down here, has been an absolute godsend. You know, I attended more burn suppers this year than I ever have, and probably ever will. Dressed from the waist up, obviously, and yeah, we thought we'd do something of our own, so we put a supper together. Cammy got involved, which was very good of him. Alistair Hutton did a little bit for us, and some of our members did bits and pieces, and it was a real pleasure to do. And I hope, although we all need to get back to normal meetings, I really hope, for my sake, rather selfishly, that some form of virtual, you know, connection, some kind of virtual events still exist. Maybe not as regularly as they are at the moment, but I really, really enjoyed them. And I must say that I don't think I've met such a friendly, welcoming, warm group of people. It's been a real pleasure to get to know everyone virtually.
Well, that's a nice sentiment to finish off with. And talking about sentiments, you used your technical ability to put together a wee video for the end of your virtual supper. Do you mind if we maybe attach that to the end of this podcast?
Certainly not. No, we didn't really know how to end our virtual thing, so we thought, well, we'll stick Auld Lang Syne at the end and put some nice pictures on. So certainly, be great. Well,
we'll do that. In the meantime, just let me say thank you very much for giving us your time to tell us about your life with Robert Burns. Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, gents.